بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله وسلم وبارك على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. And we begin with the grace of Allah Azza wa Jal the second session for questions on our course, the Islamic Faith Fusul fil Aqidah. So today's class would be all devoted to answering the questions that you have posted on Facebook and on the website. Ishaq says, in what state can one pray salah in his or her shoes? The Prophet ﷺ said, صلوا في نعالكم فإن اليهود لا تصلي في نعالها. Pray while wearing your shoes, sandals, for Jews do not pray wearing them. And in this hadith, it is clear that the Prophet ﷺ is saying to us a sunnah without putting any limitations to it or any conditions. And this means that praying while in your shoes is a sunnah. It is also proven from authentic hadith that all of you know that the Prophet started the prayer ﷺ in his masjid wearing his sandals or shoes. And the companions were wearing their shoes as well. In the middle of the salat, the Prophet took off his shoes and placed them beside him. So the companions, seeing this, may Allah be pleased with them, they all took their shoes off and did exactly as the Prophet had done. After the prayer was over, the Prophet ﷺ asked his companions, why did you do that? Why did you take off your shoes? So they said, you took off your shoes, therefore we took ours. So the Prophet ﷺ explained to them and he said, Jibreel came to me while in prayer and told me that there are impurities in my shoes. So I took them off. Therefore, whoever wants to pray in his shoes should look into his shoes, and if there are no impurities, he should pray in them. So what do we understand? We understand that there is no state where it recommends or discourage you from praying in your shoes or sandals. You can do that anytime you want. However, nowadays, the vast majority of masjids are, the floor, the ground is covered by carpets that are constantly hoovered and cleaned. And the vast majority of Muslims don't know the ruling, don't know the sunnah. So if you were to come with your shoes, with whatever sand, soil, mud on them, nothing impure, but it would make the masjid's carpets and how it looks dirty. At the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they had no carpets, nothing on the ground. It was only sand and pebbles. So it didn't matter whether you were barefooted or wearing shoes. But nowadays it's a different story. So it is highly recommended to take them off, if not mandatory. But if you're praying in in a mall or in an airport or in a hospital or in the market or in the streets, you do not need to take your shoes or sandals or slippers off at all. You can pray in them following the sunnah. Safana says, I ask dua like my particular property want to get sold quickly so that my debts will get closed. If I asked in this way, it is correct. I am afraid that Allah may have any other way to fulfill my debts. So if I ask in the same way above, then Allah will have different plan so that my way of dua get ignored, something get delayed or get delayed. Please help me out in this. I don't understand the question clearly, but let me try to give it a shot. So Safana is saying that I'd like Allah Azza wa Jal to assist me sell my property quickly so that I can pay off my debts. But I don't know what Allah has plans for me. So I'm afraid if I make dua, this would conflict with Allah's plans. And I don't want to anger Allah or to not wait for what Allah has in store for me. This is all nonsense, Safana. No one knows what Allah has in store for us. No one knows what Allah has predestined for us. So all what we can do is make dua and be content with the result. So if shaitan whispers in my ears and says, if you make dua that Allah helps you sell your plot, maybe this goes against Allah's plans, and 2 months later the property value would double and you will feel sorry and regret it. Okay, so I will not sell the plot. Then shaitan comes to you and says, well, if you don't sell the plot, the debt would be haunting you 24/7 and you will feel depressed, and maybe in 2 months time the prices and the values of property would go down and you would lose half of what you would have gotten if you were to sell it today. Do you think that this is logical, or this is plain and simple from shaitan? Definitely this is from shaitan messing with your head, and you should ignore that and not pay attention to it. Allah tells you to make dua. Whatever Allah has in plan for you, no one can force Allah to do what He does not want. So if there is good in it, it will take place. Allah will make it happen. If not, then your dua would not be answered. So be content with whatever Allah decrees for you, and inshallah you will have what you want. Samia says, my brother married a non-Muslim in court and not a nikah. He is no more. He passed away a few years back. I continued to keep contact with his wife and young daughter with the sole intention of da'wah, and still pray to Allah to guide them to Islam. My question is, do I have any relation with his daughter with Islamic perspective? Well, this is something we cannot answer unless we know the background and the circumstances. Generally speaking, any marriage that takes place without the Islamic procedure is not a valid marriage. So the valid marriage has to have what is known as ijab and qubul, proposal and acceptance. And it has to have a guardian, and it has to have 2 Muslim witnesses. Having read your question, Samia, it seems that your brother married this woman only as a legal or civil marriage. So there was no proper nikah, meaning that her father, who's the guardian, did not propose and say, I give you my daughter in marriage. And there were no 2 witnesses as well, Muslim witnesses, which makes the marriage invalid. Now, having said that, if your brother thought that this was a legitimate marriage and he had zero knowledge of what nikah was. Some people don't know. They're so ignorant that they don't know what's the ruling. So let's assume that this woman was a Christian or a Jew, and he married her thinking that a civil marriage would be an Islamic marriage, because nikah should only be with Muslim women. But due to the fact that she's not a Muslim, she's a Jew or a Christian, then he thought that this was valid. In this case, this marriage is not valid, but the girl whom he accepted as his own child and gave her his name, this marriage would be considered to be wat'u shubha, which means intercourse in doubt, meaning that he thought that she was his legitimate wife, and hence the daughter is his daughter. And if he were alive, we would have asked him to rectify his mistake by marrying an Islamic marriage. But due to the fact that he is deceased and he cannot rectify this anymore, I believe, inshallah, that she is his daughter and she is your niece. You can deal with her in such a fashion. But if the woman was not a Jew or a Christian, if she was a Hindu or an atheist, clearly declaring that she's not any of the three religions, Islam, Judaism, or Christianity, in this case, this girl was born out of wedlock and she has nothing to do with you or your family. Azleen Ahmed says, how should one react if a born Muslim admits he's no longer in Islam and that nothing people can say will change his mind because he is happy with his situation? This is a clear declaration of apostasy. A born Muslim who says that he has nothing relating him to Islam and he is happy with that and he doesn't want, and nothing will change his mind, this is an apostate. He's a kafir. So there isn't anything to react upon except to treat this person as a kafir, as an apostate, until he reverts to Islam and becomes a Muslim. Mu'een Hussein says, if I buy a teddy bear for my 2-year-old niece for birthday, not celebrating with cake or anything, just a gift, will I be sinful? The short answer is yes. The long answer is Satan has steps, and he doesn't come all of a sudden with a major sin or an innovation. Rather, he starts bit by bit. He's patient. He can wait for tens of years, and he doesn't care. What counts is that you would fall into sin. So, do you think if Muslims simply exchange gifts on the day of birth of a person, that they would just limit it to that? The answer is, of course not. Look what's happening all over the world, the Muslim world. How all of this began. How did all of this begin? It began by a single step of Satan's, followed by another, followed by others, until we have reached this conclusion. So now you see people throwing parties in hotels for birthdays, having a birthday cake with candles numbered as his age, and with a song, happy birthday to you, happy birthday dear Asim, happy birthday to you, and then blowing the candles with a wish. That will definitely take place. Then exchanging gifts. All of this started most probably with a gift, or even with a congratulation, happy birthday, full stop. But next year, the following year, you will slowly deteriorate like a man standing in quicksand until it drowns you. Therefore, why emphasize on that particular day out of the 365 days a year? Because this is what the disbelievers do. And imagine what birthdays led them to. It led them to Christmas. It became part of the religion to celebrate the Christmas, the birthday of Jesus, peace be upon him. Look at the super Sufis among the Muslims. It led them to celebrate the birthday of our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in al-Mawlid. All of this is not part of the religion. Therefore, I highly advise you, Moyan, to ignore such thoughts that come to you. You want to be kind to your niece? Buy her a gift any time of the year. Take her shopping any time of the year. Take her to the fun fairs if you wish, but not relate this to her birthday. Fahim says, I have a question. My family members are Muslims and pray. They give zakat, but they are forcing me for a job in the banking industry. How to make them understand? They give a very irrigating argument, like all of the world goes with banking, money, directly or indirectly, and it is a secure job. What should be my answer or course of action? Well, Fahim, first of all, you are a man. And part of your job description as a man is to hold your grounds and not to be hesitant and not to be reluctant or confused, where people play with you like children play with a football. It's part of your job description to remain steadfast as a man. No one can force you to do anything. You're not a child anymore. No one can force you to eat or drink or stand up or sit down. You do whatever you want because you're a man. Secondly, when it comes to jobs, this is your life. You have to tell them that this is none of any of you's business. Whether I take a job here or there, this is my decision. This is my preference. Is it a secure job? In worldly terms, of course it is. Banking industry is one of the most interesting careers one can get involved into according to the worldly standards. According to the religious standards, it is one of the worst. It's one of the worst because it is one of the 7 major sins in Islam, where Allah cursed the one who takes riba, that is the customer, and the one who gives riba, and that is the bank, depending which one is lending who, and the one who registers it, the accountant, and the 2 witnesses who are not charging anything, just doing it for the sake of Allah? No, they're doing it just for being the Good Samaritans. So, worldly standards, yes, it's a secure job. Islamic standards, it is one of the most heinous and dangerous jobs because it takes the person straight to hell. As for their claim that everybody's dealing with it, this is true. Also, everybody is indulged in haram, whether it is consuming haram income or smoking or abandoning salat, not praying it in the masjid, or free mixing, or indulging in illicit relationships, bribing, corruption. All over the world we see this. So just because the vast majority of people consume intoxicants, wine and whiskey and beer, etc., etc., doesn't make it halal. Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتَ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. Verily that the vast majority of humans won't accept Islam even if you try your level best. So the majority is not a criteria that we judge by. Logic, however, as we spoke about on Monday's class, last Monday, which is number 16, it's a very important lesson to listen to over and over again. What is your family doing? Giving precedence, giving a priority to their minds, to their logic and reason, or to the revelation of the Quran and the Sunnah? Without any doubt, they are saying that our logic and reason come first. And this is dangerous. This casts shades and shadows and doubts over their Islam. Are you telling me that what Allah has prohibited and the Prophet cursed Islam, those who deal with it, are you telling me that I should overlook this and put it behind me and work in such a job just because it pays well? Well, why would I do that? Why wouldn't I go for prostitution? That pays even more. Why don't I deal in drugs? That pays more and more. And maybe if I sell arms to different warring countries, I can make a lot of money. These are things that are un-Islamic, sinful, unethical. Just because it generates money doesn't make it halal. Just because everybody's dealing with it does not make it halal. So you have to try to convince your family to go back to the Quran and the Sunnah and to see what Allah wants and not what they want. Zayd Zubair says, is growing the beard and keeping our garments above the ankle wajib, or they are just sunnah? Someone told us that a man came to the Prophet ﷺ to abide by only the 5 pillars of Islam. When the man left, the Prophet said ﷺ, if he is true, he'll enter Jannah. He did not tell him about growing the beard and so on. Please help me out. Well, this is a great misunderstanding and unfortunate confusion that many of the laymen tend to circulate among the people to justify themselves shaving their beards and probably wearing long trousers. The hadith of the nomad who came to the Prophet ﷺ asking him about Islam. So he asked about the 5 pillars or the 4. So the Prophet told him about the Shahada. The Prophet ﷺ also told him about the prayer. The Prophet told him about fasting. And he did not, to my recollection, tell him about Hajj, which is a pillar of Islam. And when you look at the hadith, you will find that it highlighted the pillars of Islam, not all what is included in Islam in terms of do's and don'ts. So by the logic of these people talking to you, Zaid, if I were to say that hitting my parents and beating them up is okay, because the Prophet ﷺ did not mention it in this hadith. And he said that he will be successful and he will enter paradise if he was saying the truth. So does this make any sense? Of course not. And if a person also claims that all what is prohibited in Islam, it's okay to make, as long as I just pray and fast Ramadan and maybe give zakat. Because the Prophet said he has said the truth if he succeeded. And likewise, everything that is mandatory in Islam other than the prayer and fasting would be discluded. I would be disregarding it because the hadith did not mention it. No one says this in Islam at all. No one at all said this. All what they said was, this is the minimum requirement for entering paradise. So yes, you may just pray 5 times, fast Ramadan, give zakat, maybe perform Hajj once in a lifetime. But if you do any sin, if you abandon anything that is mandatory, such as being dutiful to your parents, such as not harming your neighbors, honoring your guests, being kind to your wife, being fair with your wives and your children, connecting your next of kin without severing it. All of these, if someone does not do them or does something that is haram, he will be punished in hell at 10 years, 1,000 years, Allah knows how long. Inevitably, he will end up in Jannah because he's a Muslim for doing these minimal acts, which were prayer, fasting, etc. But it does not at all have to do anything with whether growing the beard and keeping the trousers above the ankles are mandatory or recommended sunnah. So to answer your question, shaving the beard is totally prohibited by the 4 schools of thought. The Prophet ﷺ ordered by saying, أعفوا اللحى, أطلقوا اللحى, أكرموا اللحى, أرخوا اللحى, أسبلوا اللحى. All of these words are verbs of order, telling you to let go, honor, leave, not touch, in a sense. And all of these are in order form. It's like when your father says, go and fetch me my keys, and you're playing video games, and you say, yeah, sure, and you continue, and he says, didn't you hear what I say? And he says, yeah, I heard, and you continue. What do you expect to happen? He will spank you. He will beat the heck out of you. You have no justification to say that, why are you hitting me? I thought that you were telling me, if you wish, if you want, go and get me the keys, but this is not an order. No, no one says this. Once the Prophet tells you to do something, this is a must. Unless there is another evidence reducing it from mandatory into recommended. Therefore, it is mandatory. Likewise, when the Prophet ﷺ threatens those who wear their trousers or garments underneath to exceed the ankle level by saying that it is in hell, it is punishable in hellfire. This is not intimidating you or please think about it. This is a promise. If you do this, you're going to be burnt in hell because of such a sin. So I hope this answers your question. Fatima says, I saw many Muslims, including myself, after making dua or supplication, wipe hands over face. Is this perceived by a fatwa or sunnah or whatever you call it? The answer is no. When we make dua, generally speaking, not related to after salah, generally speaking, I am between adhan and iqamah and I raise my hands and make dua. After I finish, some people wipe their faces. And this is not backed up by any authentic hadith. So the hadith that backs it up is not authentic. Hence, one should not do that. Now look at the steps of shaitan. How many times have you seen people not only wiping their faces, but rather wiping their whole bodies and every inch of it? I've seen many. How did this start? I personally have approached many. And usually I approach them with diplomacy because I know that I scare people. And many people told me that I have an intimidating face, very serious. Whoa, this is the face of a killer. So I go to them and say, Assalamu alaikum. And the guy says, Alaikum salam. I said, Akhi, would you accept a word of advice from an elder brother, or should I refrain? Immediately when they see you speak like this, so no. If they're younger, they say, Uncle, please, advise me. If he's a little bit older, he says, yeah, no problem. If he's way older, he says, Akhi, don't make yourself older, I'm older than you. So I broke the ice with the grace of Allah. So I would tell him, Akhi, I saw you do this. Do you know any hadith that backs it up? 99.9% says no, but I saw someone do this, so I thought that this is barakah, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, I'll tell you the proper sunnah, and it's up to you to take it or not. The Prophet ﷺ would never do this except in two occasions. One, before going to bed, he used to cup his hands, blow, then recite the 3 quls and wipe over his body. Repeat this 3 times. Or whenever he felt pain or got sick, he used to do ruqya on himself by cupping his hands, reciting the 3 quls, then blow. See the opposite. Night adhkar or bedtime adhkar, we blow, then recite. In ruqya, we recite, then blow, and he would wipe over the area that aches him or hurts him. Never ever was it reported that the Prophet ﷺ wiped his face after salat or after dua or his body. So this is my advice. I apologize again for interrupting you and for intruding on your privacy like this, but I hope you forgive me. 100% would never argue and would say, Jazakallahu khayran, barakallahu feek, may Allah increase us in knowledge. I have learned from you. End of story. So always remember, when you have a hadith, people honor it. People value it. I never go and say, Sheikh so-and-so says, Sheikh so-and-so says. This makes some people retract a little bit, not accept. Unless you know that they're 100% okay with great scholars of Islam that you're quoting, then yes, this is a point of power that you can add to it. So, in short, wiping the face after dua or invocation or supplication is an innovation. It's not valid. Yasser says, can I give gold as mahar to my wife? My parents plan to give a gold set and bangles to my wife to be, as it is a tradition in the subcontinent. I asked them to make it as mahar in the nikah documents. Is this permissible? The answer is yes. If the woman agrees to that, the answer would be yes. But if the woman says, I am not less than anyone else, your sister received a dowry in cash and gold sets from her parents-in-law. My brother got married and did the same thing. So by skipping the dowry and only expecting the gold set to be sufficient, this is permissible if she agrees to it. But if she sees it as an insult, then no, you should include the dowry. And most likely you're doing what you're doing for the sake of saving money. And that is a bit cheap, because the gold set is a gift from your parents. It's not mandatory upon them to give her. So if they don't want to give her, no problem, but your dowry is from you to your wife, and this is mandatory upon you, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Latifa says, is signing an affidavit that does not mention the name of Allah haram? It's just have, I will do this and that. If an affidavit is a legal document or commitment that you will do something in front of two lawyers or a judge, and you promise to do it, it's binding legally. But it's not an oath, because you did not take the name of Allah, and surely you did not take the name of other than Allah, which would make it shirk at that time. So yeah, there's no problem in that, inshallah. Rashid says, can we pray evening adhkar just before Maghrib adhan and prayers? The answer is an issue of dispute. And after looking into it, it seems that it is permissible to say the evening adhkar after Asr prayer, and the closer it is to sunset or after it, the better. So to answer your question, Latifa, yes, if you say your evening adhkar like 15 minutes, 20 minutes before sunset, this does the job, inshallah. Or Rashid's questions, not Latifa. Okay. Hamdan says, what is the ruling of dua al-qunut? Now, whenever dua al-qunut is mentioned, people usually mean by it one of two. Either they're talking about the general dua al-qunut, which everybody knows, which is done and performed during witr prayer. Allahumma hdina fi man hadayt, etc. And this is a sunnah which the Prophet ﷺ taught his grandson Al-Hasan ibn Ali when he was a child, and he requested the Prophet to teach him a dua to read during witr. So the Prophet taught this dua to him. So it's authentic, it is recommended. If you do it, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah says, that's good. If you skip it, that's good. If you do it sometimes and skip it sometimes, that is also good. Because the Prophet was never, as some reported, to have said it, but he taught it to his grandson. So it can go either way. It's not mandatory. You can do it, you can say it, and you can skip it if you wish. The second type of dua, which qunut, which people usually refer to, is what only the Shafi'i school of thought, from all the major schools of thought in Islam, only the Shafi'is do it. And they only do it in Fajr prayer. So if you go to Indonesia, to Malaysia, sometimes in some masjids in Syria and in Egypt, etc., you will find that after the second rak'ah, saying Sami Allahu liman hamidah, the Imam makes dua. And this dua is not from the Sunnah. And the vast majority of scholars say that this is not from the Sunnah. What the Prophet had done, alayhi salatu wasalam, for a whole month was to make dua al-qunut in all 5 fard prayers, not in Fajr only. And after 1 month, he was told to stop. So he stopped. And none of the companions had performed it after he stopped. So even if after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali never performed Dua al-Qunut. So what we obtain from this is that the Shafi'i school of thought is wrong big time in this issue. Now, what would I do if I go to Kuala Lumpur and I pray Fajr in the masjid and I see them offer Qunut and I am a follower? There's no problem in me raising my hands and saying Ameen to the dua, because they are following a reputable school of thought, though the verdict is wrong totally. But I wouldn't go to say that it invalidates the prayer or it is haram. This is the best of their knowledge, or to the best of their knowledge. Ma'suma says, tell me the ruling on Salatul Tawbah and Salatul Shukr. What should we say when we read Quran and dua came? Should we say Ameen during our tilawah? So these are two separate questions. The first question, what to say in Salatul Tawbah. Salatul Tawbah is like any other salah. 2 rak'ahs, you pray Fatiha and Surah and Tashahhud in the end, and you offer salam. You may in sujood ask Allah for forgiveness, but this was not mentioned in the salah. So the intention of seeking Allah's forgiveness and repentance when praying it and concluding it, that would be sufficient. As for Salatul Shukr, we've stated that many times that there is no specific salat of shukr, and this hadith is not authentic, so it is not something part of Islam to offer 2 rak'ahs of gratitude or shukr. As for what to say when there are du'as in the Quran, nothing. You just listen to it, especially if you are a follower. But if you are the imam and you pass by an ayah where it mentions hellfire and torment of Allah, you seek refuge in Allah. And if you pass by an ayah of mercy and the mentioning of Jannah, you ask Allah from His grace and favors and blessing, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Baffa Muhammad says, is it allowed for a Muslim young lady to speak about sexual harassment openly, like to enlighten people? First of all, it is totally prohibited to speak in front of men. So opposite gender is totally out of the question. Secondly, if she is addressing only females and she's truthful in what she's saying, and this does not include any exposure of her own sins. So she wouldn't say that I used to mix with men, and I used to have a boyfriend, we used to go to school, and this happened. This is exposing her sin. She should not address this. Thirdly, lots of these experiences when it comes to harassment may involve provoking lust and desire. You don't know who you are addressing when you speak about he did this to me and I did that and I tried to avoid it and he continued. You don't know what fantasies would go into the minds of those listening to you. So in a sense, I believe that such sharing of experiences to enlighten people is not healthy. You can simply abide by the Quran and the Sunnah. Teach girls not to free mix, not to communicate with non-mahram, to always protect their chastity and cover themselves properly even in front of mahram, and to avoid anything that is dubious or weird and strange. Uthman says, can we sell special spices designed to cook various meat dishes to non-Muslims? The answer is yes. Spices are spices. As long as they're halal and they're used by people in halal, there's nothing wrong in that. If you don't know whether they'll cook halal meat or haram meat with that, it's none of your business. You're selling spices. It's like someone coming to buy water from you, and you say, what are you going to use this water for? Are you going to by any chance make ice cubes so that you would drink it with your whiskey? This is not your business. Selling water is halal, that's it. Baushanara says, are we allowed to pray in the car when we are traveling due to its being difficult to come home and pray due to running out of prayer time? The answer is no. It is not permissible for a person who is capable of standing up to pray sitting down, unless there is a legitimate reason. The hadith of Imran ibn al-Husayn, the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, Salli qa'iman. You must pray. This is a pillar that you pray standing up. So if you're in a car, simply stop the car and pray on time, on the road, in a park, at the parking lot, at a masjid, whatever. But don't continue to drive or to pray sitting down without a legitimate reason. Princess says, as a woman, am I allowed to answer the salams of greetings of non-mahram? If there is no fitna, no problem. If you are in a supermarket or if you are in a family gathering and someone non-mahram says, Assalamu alaikum, you say, alaikum salam. There's no fitna. But if it's one-to-one, there's no one other than you two, that is a great place for fitna. You should not answer that person. You should not be there in the first place, and Allah knows best. Muhajjabeen says, can you please describe the term tasbih? I think she means tashbih, not tasbih. Tasbih is to say subhanallah. Tashbih is to simulate or to give similarity to something. And if anyone point his own body parts while talking about any attributes of Allah, will it be considered as tashbih? Like one is talking about Allah's hands or eyes and pointing to his hands or keeping his finger on his eyes. So does this come under tashbih? If not, then what is it? First of all, Allah stated in the Quran that there is nothing similar to him, unto him. There's nothing like him, Azza wa Jal. Which means that no one can give any similarity to Allah. Now, this is a general rule. When we speak about, for example, the hearts of humans are between two fingers of Allah's fingers, flipping them as He wishes. No one can say like this, A'udhu Billah. Because this is totally prohibited. The Prophet had never done this, now neither did the Salaf. When we talk about Allah descending in the last third of the night to the lower heaven, no one says that Allah Azza wa Jal does this. He puts his foot first. A'udhu Billah. This is blasphemous. Nobody ever does this simulation. But there are evidences where the Prophet ﷺ would do something that indicates that the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal are real but not simulating them. So for example, the Prophet ﷺ in a hadith narrated from Ibn Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, said, the Prophet said, Allah, may He be glorified, will take His heavens and His earths in His hands and will say, I am Allah, clenching and unclenching His fist. The Prophet is doing this, alayhi salatu wassalam. I am the sovereign. And I looked at the mimbar and saw it shaking at the bottom, and I thought that it would fall with the Messenger ﷺ on it. So the Prophet is the one who's doing this. In another hadith, which is also authentic, the Prophet read this ayah. They made not a just estimate to Allah of Allah, such as due to Him, and on the day of resurrection, the whole of the earth will be grasped by His hand, and the heavens will be rolled up in His right hand. Glorified is He, and high is He above all that they associate as partners with Him. And the Prophet ﷺ was gesturing like this with his hand, moving it back and forth. Allah Azza wa Jal also said in another ayah, let me try to find it. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ read the ayah of Surah An-Nisa, and in the end it says, Inna Allah kana sami'an basira. Allah was all hearing, all seeing. And the Prophet did this, putting his thumb on his ear and his index finger on his eyes. So some ignorant people thought that this was simulating. And a'udhu billah, how could this be when the Prophet ﷺ himself read to us Allah's ayah? There is nothing like Him, and He is all hearer, all seer. Nothing like Him. So what was the Prophet doing when he was clenching and unclenching his fist, and when he was putting his fingers on his ear and eyes? The scholars say that this is to prove that this is actual attribute and not what some people would manipulate and distort the meaning. Lots of the Ash'aris and the Mu'tazila and the Jahmiyyah say that the hearing and seeing is metaphorical and it is only knowledge. And they say that Allah's hand is metaphorical. Allah does not have a hand. And it's Allah's power. So by the Prophet clenching and unclenching his fist, is telling them that this is the actual attribute of Allah, which Allah has a hand. Not that His hand is like His. So this is only to prove to the people that the actual attribute exists. How? We don't know. How? What is it similar to? We don't know. Can we give an imitation of it? We cannot. And all of this is well established from the Quran and from the Sunnah. And I hope this answers your question. Saif says, is it permissible to work in a supermarket that sells cigarettes? The answer is, if you have nothing to do with loading and unloading, selling or handling, cashing or moving cigarettes or haram items, then your job is halal. Most people work in the groceries, which is halal, or work in the vegetables and fruits section, which is halal, or deal with electronics, which is halal. When it comes to cigarettes, if you're a cashier, you cannot work there. If you are a porter or a laborer that carries the boxes and put them on the shelves, etc., no, you should not deal with that because it is haram for you. Zed says, is this allowed when you want to buy something like a land, for example, and you don't have cash, but you can go to the bank and the bank pays for the land and you start to pay the bank? Is this not riba? I was in an Islamic bank or an Islamic dars, and the sheikh told us that that's okay. Please help me out. No, this is not okay. And I am 100% certain that you misunderstood what your sheikh said. Selling and buying should be done by two parties. Whenever a third party intervenes, this kind or form of financing is most likely riba. So if I have this plot to buy, the owner wants to buy it cash, and I don't have cash, we cannot finish and conclude this transaction unless a third party comes and says, listen, the seller wants 100,000 euros. Here's your 100,000 euros. The buyer must pay me back 120,000 euros over the duration of XYZ. You agree? The seller says, I'm fine. The buyer says, I'm fine. The bank says, I'm fine. This is haram. This is riba. Definitely your teacher did not mean this when he was teaching his dars. When will it be permissible? When the bank comes and sees that the transaction is not going to go through due to such problems, he goes and buys the property from the seller. He gives him the 100,000 euros. Now it is in the bank's name with no strings attached from my side, no commitment. After he possesses the property, he calls me and says, I have the property you're interested in. I'm willing to sell it to you for 120,000 euros divided by 10 years. If I'm interested, I say, okay. If I'm not, I say, no, I think I'll pay rent. And he will become stuck with the property. In this case, this is totally halal and legit because I have the choice to buy or not to buy. While in the first scenario, I am forced to buy because he did not buy it from the seller until he took guarantees from me and commitment and transfer of my bank account, my salary to him, etc. So therefore, I hope this answers your question. Rabia says, there are certain paid apps which provide coupons for people to benefit from restaurants, spa, etc. Example, when one uses any coupon of any brand, they will buy one and get another one free. Like if one goes to an open buffet with his spouse, they will only pay for one person and the other is free with the app coupon. Are these types of apps permissible to benefit from? Because one will buy the app for a package in order to get the free deals for the whole year. There are hundreds of brand in app and each brand has 3 free coupons, vouchers. The answer is no. This is not permissible because it involves gambling. So discount cards and many other things that are similar to it, where you buy a specific card for 100 euros and you will avail a lot of discounts in 5-star hotels, in some restaurants, in some spas, etc. And they have a booklet this big. Scholars say that there is a lot of ambiguity in this because you may buy the coupon or the app and not use it. So money down the drain. And you may buy the app or the coupon and you would benefit thousands and thousands more than the actual value. So this ambiguity where these discounts may come to a fact or not is not permissible. And I'm sharing this with you for the first time, in 1982, that was a long time ago, they came up with a similar scheme here in Saudi Arabia. And I participated in it. And I went at that year, traveled overseas, I think to the US or something like that. And I booked a room in the specific hotel, Hilton Hotel, where it stated that it would give me 30%. When I went there, They said, we don't have anything like this. We don't have any agreement with that company. So I took all the invoices, and when I returned back, I filed it to them and required a reimbursement, and they never came back to me. So most of these companies, they have schemes, they have tricks down their sleeves. Even if they were legit, again, this transaction is not permissible due to the fact of ambiguity and not being legit. Muhammad Basha says, is it permissible to pray with our vest without shirt? Muhammad, a man can pray as long as he's covering his shoulders without any problem. There's no need to have a shirt underneath, and Allah knows best. And finally, the name is in Tamil, so I cannot read it. Sheikh, does women need to untie their hair during wudu for mash of the head, for wiping over their head? The answer is no. If a woman has her hair in a bun and she wants to wipe, she just does this, and that's it. If she has her hair with a ribbon or something like a claw, I don't know what they call it, and she wipes over that, there is no problem. Her hair should not be 100% exposed or in a certain fashion she's wearing it so that she can wipe over it. It can be any type, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. And this is all the time we have. Until we meet next Monday, I leave you fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.